Hi everyone, Club Thinny going up Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Kayo Dot record, Coffins on I.O. Kayo Dot is a New York-based rock band fronted by songwriter, singer, multi-instrumentalist, just experimental music workhorse Toby Driver. There is quite a bit of knowledge, experience, and ability at Toby's disposal in his musical projects. It shows with the wide array of fantastic musicians that he's worked with over the years. It shows in all the genres that he's explored in Kayo Dot: chamber music, experimental and avant-garde metal, death metal, progressive rock, and jazz fusion. All of these flavors actually turning up on the band's last full-length record, Hubardo, quite a long record and an ambitious record too, compositionally and conceptually, with a very strange story running congruently through all of the tracks. There are a variety of vocal styles on this record, a variety of genres, as I just said. There are some intense spots, some loud spots, some absolutely gorgeous, moving, and beautiful spots on this thing too. But all of this ability often, in my opinion, drives Kayo Dot and Toby into maybe a little too much indulgence. Or maybe even negligence, because we do have records like Coyote and Gamma Knife, whose production is seriously underwhelming and just a little too lo-fi to completely complement the ambition and the musical style on these albums. I absolutely do appreciate that these records are not overproduced in the way that a lot of progressive metal and progressive rock albums these days are, but underproduction is not really all that preferable either. However, in the case of Hubardo, that record's recording was stellar. But as I said, occasionally it could be kind of long-winded, or just have some really unrewarding musical passages, or just some lackluster vocal performances. Maybe they go on assuming something is a little more interesting than it is because it's maybe different than what the last track was doing, or it's a relatively new sound for them. And this feeling of adventure over quality that I get on Kayo Dot's records was just a little confirmed for me the moment I put this album on, just from the opening track. Because it became very apparent very quickly that this wasn't gonna just be a progressive rock album, it wasn't just gonna be a progressive metal album or an experimental rock album. We are essentially getting some prog mixed with some darkwave, some gothic rock, with a generous helping of synthesizers. Of course, it is not surprising to hear the longest track as the first track on this entire record. The track can be a little challenging, but not necessarily for the right reasons. The synthesizers are a little high in the mix, they're kind of farty, they sound gaudy, the falsetto vocals, the watery guitars, the kind of start-stop groove that this thing is riding on. There are characteristics about this track I don't really care for, but the song at the core of this music, to me, is actually not that bad. And this song does do a good job of, I guess, setting the tone and the flavor of this record. This song essentially works in 3 parts, with some sudden crescendos erupting at the 4 and the 8-minute marks. Both changes are great, but just before they occur, the band starts to just border on sounding kind of mundane, mostly because I feel like they continue to pile one on top of the other some progressive rock and some goth rock cliches. Sometimes the music just sounds a little too self-absorbed, and on top of it, the vocals, while impassioned, can come off just a little ghoulish. This song could take a little while to digest. I recommend listening to it more than one time, especially if you're into goth rock or progressive rock. But the next track on here, Off-Ramp Cycle Pattern 22, the vocals here are so unbelievably amateurish, and the instrumentation in the background just continues to cycle over a lot of the same grooves. I push the needle in. And the very finish of this song sounds like a comedically spooky synth rock odyssey. While there are moments on this record that I like, there are a lot of aspects to these songs, like I said, that just border on making these tracks sort of intolerable. And when I'm not getting vocals that I just don't really care for, sometimes the band is repeating through musical pieces without that much progression or tension. Like with the song Library Subterranean, I like the end of this track, the very hard-hitting odd time progressive rock riffs all over this track are really fiery as they start, but as they continue, I feel like things just lose intensity. I think this track could have used just a little bit more than some screaming saxophone to keep this musical passage interesting. The only thing really keeping this part of the song alive to me is the drummer, who is absolutely amazing. Now with the song that I heard first off of this record, Assassination of Adam. Fantastic track, most aggressive track on the entire record. Really noisy walls of guitars and drums. I love the downstroked guitar riffs on this thing, really pummeling, great groove. But there are moments where the sort of lo-fi recording of this track holds back the intensity of the noisy instrumentation. When I go into a Kayo Dot record, it's just so weird because there's so many things that I like. There's so many things I admire. There's so many things I think are top-notch and fantastic. But then there are things that I don't care for at all or really just ruin a track for me. And what's funny is that it's never the same thing. It's never one thing. I can never predict what it is I'm going to like or dislike about a Kayo Dot song. This vocal performance isn't that good. The recording here is just okay. This part is mixed really weird. This part's a little repetitive. This part's a little long-winded. But on the flip side, here's a captivating melody. There's some great guitar playing. There's some amazing drumming. The record ends sort of as long-winded as it began, but maybe with not as interesting writing or as compelling a performance. But I still came away from this record liking much of what I heard. I guess as long as Toby and Kayo Dot continue to adventure and experiment, I will always be interested in hearing what they do next because it will be different. It will be refreshing in some way, shape, or form. Kayo Dot is pretty good at keeping me intrigued, even if they're not always keeping me entertained. I'm feeling a decent to strong 6 on this thing. Transition, if you've given this record a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? Anthony Fantano, Kayo Dot, forever.